about. But in one of the other accounts of the gospel, at the same time, Jesus has received word John's dead. And Jesus knows now the fast track is hitting for his own crucifixion. And that's one of the reasons why he said, okay, let's go into a private place. And the disciples needed that break also. There's a need for leisure and rest and all of these things. That's why God created the Sabbath to begin with, to help men to know that they needed to rest. But anyway, they decide they're going to go, and they're going to leave and go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So again, they're going from the western side to the eastern side, which was much less populated. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. They tried to do it without people really taking notice. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of all the cities, and outwent them, and came together unto him. Now, if you've ever seen the Sea of Galilee, it's shaped like an egg, right? So they're up here in the northwestern corner of the shore, right, of the shoreline, and the area over here, there's a town over here named Bethsaida, there's one over here named Bethsaida as well. And so they're cutting across that northern part of the egg, right? They're cutting across. Well, if you're up here, you have just as much of an opportunity, if the conditions are bad for boating, that you can run around the shore and run just as fast as it would take them to drive the boat across. In fact, on this occasion, the wind must have been contrary to them, because it was a little bit faster for them to run around the top edge of the Sea of Galilee along the shore. And as they're going, people are coming out of town. So where are you all going? They see this crowd. Jesus is going to be over here. So they're all coming to see him. And so they outwent them and came together unto him. And Jesus, when he came out of the boat, he comes up and he looks up. He thinks he's going to a desert place, right? Or they've left a populated place. He's come to a private place. When he come out, he saw much people, and he was moved with compassion toward them, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. They were just so hungry that his compassion for them overran his fatigue. We're tired, but these people, you know what I thought about today when I was going over my notes on this? I was thinking about, have you ever seen when a farmer goes to feed the cows, and he pulls up with the hay, and when he pulls up and he starts to take it off, the cows start coming from across the pasture, just running across the pasture toward. They recognize him and they know what he's come to do. And that's what I imagine, that Jesus comes up and all of a sudden all these people come rushing in to the shoreline to see Jesus, desperate to hear him and to receive from him. And Jesus sees this, and he sees these people, and they're so desperately in need of spiritual food and so hungry for the things of God. I say that because, and I'll mention this again in just a minute, but when Jesus fed the 4,000 a little while after this, you remember it says that one time Jesus said that they were with him for 3 days and had not eaten. So enthralled. You ever been involved in something and looked up and realized it's 3 o'clock and you were supposed to be eating lunch at noon? These people went 3 days without food, just so engrossed with Jesus. And these people were just so hungry for more of him. And so, and Jesus, when he came out, saw much people, was moved with compassion toward them, because they were sheep, not having a shepherd. He began to teach them many things. And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, this is a desert place, and now the time is far past. Jesus, it's way past eating time. The sun's almost going down, and these people are here, and they don't have any food, and we're in a desert place. And they said, send them away, that they may go into the country round about, into the villages, that they may buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. Just dismiss them and tell them to go. Go into the towns and buy food. And he answered and said to them, give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread and give them to eat? 200 pennyworth of bread. So you want us to go buy them food? You give them to eat. Well, what are we going to give them? 200 pennyworth, 200 denarii. We don't know exactly what that exchange rate would be in modern terms, but we know this, that it's the same word that was used when the man agreed with the men to say, go work for me a day and I'll give you a penny. So a penny was considered a good day's wages. A denarii was a good day's wages. 200 pennyworth then would be 200 days' wages for a man. 200 pennyworth. In fact, John's version, John goes into more detail than Mark does on this event. And John says 200 pennyworth. He mentions the exact same amount. He said 200 pennyworth wouldn't even be enough to feed all these people. We'd spent all... Now, we don't know why they came up with that. Maybe that's the amount of money they had in the bag that Judas was holding. Maybe it was just an arbitrary number they came up with. Well, 200 pennyworth of bread would not, 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't be enough to feed these people. And he saith unto them, how many loaves have ye? And go and see. And when they knew, they said 5 and 2 fishes. Now, John goes into detail saying it was a lunch a little boy brought, 5 loaves and 2 fishes. We're thinking of loaves, and probably they were more like, we were talking earlier about rice cakes. It's probably some little small cake like that. And 2 small fish. Whatever it was, a young boy was carrying it around, so it wasn't much. And so that's we've surveyed the crowd. That's all that anybody has. That little boy has a lunch of 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks by hundreds and by 50. So, they set them down in groups of 50s and 100, but when it says their ranks, it's talking about rows. So if you're wanting to pass out food as efficiently as you can to 5,000, you need to go down the line, down the line, down the line. So he divides it up, and he's giving it to the apostles, and he's going to give it to them. Now, they still don't know what he's going to do, because that's all they've got, but he's telling them to sit down. Well, if you tell us to sit down, we'll tell them to sit down, but I don't know what you're going to give them. So they sit down in groups of 50 or 100, but they left rows so they can go in and out like that. So they could just hand it and go on to the next one. Do it as efficiently as they can. When he had taken the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and blessed and brake the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before them, and the 2 fishes divided he among them all. Blessed, John says, he looked up toward heaven and thanked God. So when we bless our food, we give God we bless the Lord for our food. And we also, I'm big on this, my family knows this, that I don't play around when it comes to praying for food. We not only thank God, but there may be something in that. I'm praying for God to sanctify the food. So I want him to bless it that way, but I want to, technically what it means to bless the food is to give God thanks for it. If you look at what John wrote, he lifted up toward heaven and he thanked God for it. And it says, and he gave it to the 12, he divides it up. Now they're not noticing this. So I'm imagining he's taking it, breaking it, and giving it to them. And somehow they're not grasping what's going on here. And so they're handing it out to these people, but they're not really, the Bible talks about this later. They didn't consider it until sometime later. Jesus pointed it out and said, how did you feed those 5,000? Well, how did 5 loaves and 2 fishes feed those people? They just couldn't grasp what was happening, this miracle. Every time they broke some, there was more there, It just kept coming. And it says in verse 42, and they did all eat and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments and of the fishes. And they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 men. So there were a lot of people here. And they took that little boy's lunch, and when they were done feeding them, they take up 12 baskets full of fragments. We're talking about, probably like a lunch pail basket, one for each one of the apostles, it would seem like. They take up how do you get that and end up with 12 baskets full of fragments from a little boy's lunch that was 5 loaves and 2 fish, and it's still just, they didn't see it. They didn't recognize, what was going on. And So it's at that time he decides to go back over. We'll stop right there, and we'll pick up next time. But I think, again, remember what we're talking about. Jesus is training them, and he sends them out 2 by 2, and he says, don't take anything with you. Remember we talked about last week, don't take any money, don't take any supplies, don't take any extra clothes or supplies of any kind. And he wanted to teach them, I'm going to take care of you. And here again, now he's showing them 2 things. One, I'm going to take care of you. So I can miraculously take care of you.
Amen.
And the second thing is, I'm going to give you the bread of life, and I want you to take the bread of life to the world. And so he's foreshadowing the gospel in all of this as well. And so there's 2 things that God's going to supply, and we've been given the bread from heaven to take to the world and to hand it out to the world.